Hey, good evening, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. It's somewhere between breakfast and dinner for Ari and Ananya, if I'm not terribly mistaken. I'm sorry, breakfast and lunch, but
No, no, no. Lunch and dinner.
lunch and dinner. Okay. Because Ari was just talking about brunch that he'd had. So I presume, okay, I did need to look at my time zones. But anyway, so Table Talk is about conversations that are about food. It's not a recipe show. It's not about how to cook something. It's just talking about topics that are overlapping and adjacent with food, which is really pretty much everything. Which is food is the sort of an excuse for me to chat with interesting people. And this is a series that was born of a group that I started on Facebook that is called Simple Recipes for Complicated Times. And that group and the different ways in which people talked about food was the inspiration behind starting this series of conversations. So with me today are people, Ananya, who I met on the Simple Recipes group, and Ari, who I met through her, uh, have also got a project that they have been running through the pandemic, which is called thinnai Kreyol. Did I say that right?
You did.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's about Creole cultures. And we're going to be just talking about that. But at the beginning, I thought I would just ask both of you, first, okay, I mean, welcome and thank you for joining me, right? Uh,
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Peter.
so perhaps, and Ari, perhaps you can go first on this one. Just give me a few of your early memories of food and kitchens.
Yeah, since we are talking about Creole food, I moved. I was born in Madagascar, as you know, and we moved to Pondicherry, where my father comes from, in '65. And I used to live in a street which is called Perumal Kovil. So, as you know, Perumal Kovil is a very Hindu Vaishnavite street full of Mudaliars and Chettiars and Ayers and everything. But the 60s, 70s, it was mostly the Franco-Ponticellian, which I belong, the community I belong to. They came back after serving in the army, the French army. So most of these people, when before leaving to France, they come from the neighboring villages because they were poor people. And but when they came back to settle down to Pondicherry, they came with full of money, and they had to position themselves inside the urban landscape of Pondicherry. So they used to live wherever they could afford to buy a house and this. So the Permacoil Street is very interesting because, as you know, Pondicherry is a divided city from the black, what they call the white town and the black town. So the black town is where Permacoil Street is. There's the part of the street which is close to the temple. It's full of these Chettiars and Mudliars and Ayers, Brahmins. But once you go like 200 meters from the temple, it's full of these French military soldiers who has come back and bought new houses and this and that. So my street was fascinating because my father used to live with a Malagasy wife, and then there was a Monsieur Villefranche. He was living with a Polynesian wife from Tahiti. And then we have Monsieur Udma with a Vietnamese wife. So the street was full of people from different part of the world belonging to the French colonial empire. So obviously what we do, since they have been all in the French army, they know each other. So every day, one or the other, people invite each other. So we were full of Polynesian food, Vietnamese food, Guadeloupe, Martinique, and just name it. So the Permacoil Street, from the very pure Vaishnavite thing, become totally creolized. So this is my first encounter with the food and the melange of culture and the cuisine.
What was cooked in your house?
My house, as you know, because my father comes from is a Tamilian and a Christian. So mostly it's everything: beef, pork, and fish, dry fish, everything. But since Mama was from Madagascar, so we had, and Papa was also serving in the army in Vietnam. He spent a lot of time in Vietnam and in Algeria also. So all this, he came back with all this food bagage, I can call. So we used to have Malagasy food, Vietnam food, couscous, and of course, definitely Pondicherry and Tamil food. So yeah, I grew up with a totally multi-cuisine Creole culture.
The smells on those streets when
Oh
meals.
yeah, yeah, that part of the
Oh,
street.
get it.
Yeah, yeah, that part of the street, you don't smell sambar and rasam. You see,
You probably move house to house and the smell would change as you moved, right?
absolutely. So this is my souvenir memoir of my gastro memory. I would say that.
Anani, what about you? What are your earliest food memories?
One of the things that really connects Ari and me, I really believe, is this kind of very similar pattern of these early memories, even though the actual location obviously was very different. So I was born in Calcutta, and a few years after Ari, and my father and his siblings lived in a kind of very typical urban apartment in the heart of a kind of gray town Calcutta. It's an area called Park Circus, and the older I grow, the more I realize how actually very foundational it has been to the kind of human being I became. So what was this area? It's a little disheveled. It's not rich, at least not anymore. Particularly after partition, when a lot of the rich Bengali Muslim families that lived there, like Suravardi, and all these people, a lot of them moved to East Pakistan. And the ones who remained were people perhaps who, I don't know, for various crazy reasons didn't go. I mean, my grandfather was even crazier. He decided that he would actually resettle in Calcutta. I mean, he had the option to, because the people were moving, people moved. So they were moving typically between Dhaka and Calcutta, Delhi, even in the case of my great uncle who was working for the Congress. But I mean, at 1947, my grandfather was one of the few Muslims, I think, who said, I'm actually not going to go, I'm going to stay. I'm going to actually kind of be here. So people like him and his families, there were other Muslim families, people didn't go immediately. So there's quite a strong Muslim component in this area, particularly Bengali Muslim, but also because it was kind of on the train tracks. And you know what train tracks mean? That's always on the border, right? Of all kinds of mental and, kind of all kinds of, the train is very important in defining boundaries, but also kind of creating a gray zone. So along the train tracks, part of Park Circus, there were also a lot of poorer Bihari-speaking Muslims and more slum-like, areas. So there's a permeation of people coming and going. For example, people who work in your house as domestic helps will come from those areas typically. But this is a very porous place, Park Circus. There were very few boundaries. Other communities that were very important for this part were lots of different kinds of Christian communities. When we were chatting, I was talking to you about Bengali Christians, also people, Mangaloreans, Goan, people who came to work under the British, because, for example, in the railways or in different kinds of bureaucratic positions. So there were quite a few Christian families of different provenances. And of course, the local Anglo-Indian families of Calcutta were also there. So this area where I grew up was very, very mixed. Of course, there were some Bengali Hindu families too. So every religion really was represented there, but the predominant nature of this place was defined by the church and the mosque and the convent school and the tram depot and the railway lines and the Maidan. We had a park also. Because this is very urban space, nobody had houses. Everybody lived in these old style apartments. So people went and hung out on people's rooftops or in the Maidan for fresh air. I still remember all this when I was a child. So what did we eat at home? Therefore, this was, I realize now that our culture, there was a kind of very cohesive food culture of this part of Calcutta. But this food culture also linked in a kind of pipeline connecting parts of Anglo-Indian Calcutta all the way to the other original grey town, which was where the Armenians, the Jews, and all such people, more mercantile groups lived, which is in central Calcutta. So if you walk, you can walk from Calcutta, from Park Circus to that older quarter, it would take you about 2 hours and you would never leave a single Anglo-Indian gully. You could actually, so it's a very interesting network. And so the food also was networked along this kind of map. And if you were in a Christian family, you could eat pork in these places. You could have everything from sorpotel to pork chops. But obviously, in Muslim families, you wouldn't be doing that. But we would have a lot of beef. So I think beef was like the shared meat because mostly everybody, both communities could eat it. And so you would have a lot of beef preparations. For example, you would have beef curry. We would have beef mince, which went into a lot of snacks like croquettes, cutlets, chops of different kinds. You would have a lot of the same kinds of crumbed fried things you could have with fish. Brain cutlets. I remember this was a delicacy in my family. Then you would also have a lot of Muslim dishes because after all that was also, so there were some classic Bengali Muslim dishes like rezalas, kormas, biryani, of course. These things were all being cooked. But what I remember really is also the breakfasts at this house, which were very Western in a funny way. That was one thing. My grandfather was still of the generation that they ate with cutlery. They were quite anglicized. So breakfast was always sort of dedicated to this feeling of some sort of like, that was where you were influenced most. You showed your influence most, that there had been this prior connection with the kind of more Anglophone British culture. Or now we also see there's a lot of Portuguese, and the more you delve into all this, it was not just British, but it seemed like that was it was. So there would be a lot of eggs, very egg heavy family, and everybody had their own way, so there would be like a mysterious litany, 2 minutes, half a minute, 3 minutes, like everybody had their own thing of how much their egg should be boiled, omelets, different kinds. Obviously with that you had bread. But the cooking was very egalitarian. There were different people cooking. One of my uncles was deputed to do the bazaar, to go to the morning in the market and make sure that this whole big family, had everything. There wasn't much money, so it was also always a bit kind of tense. And my mother still remembers that this uncle of mine knew the art of combining, because there's also all these kind of indigenous Bengali vegetables, which went with certain fish. And, you have to know all that. The pièce de résistance was always my father's biryani. And this is something that I remember very, very clearly because my father was a great cook and he was very interested in the secrets of the kachi biryani of Calcutta, which is where you put everything completely raw in a big dekchi. The meat, the rice and the potatoes and all the masalas, nothing is cooked. And you have to know exactly the heat control and the proportions and the time and all the rest. There were many, many disasters in the early days. I remember people waiting till 3 a.m. in the morning for the biryani to be unveiled. So this is my very, very fond memory of my father and his biryani experiments. By the time he passed away, which is about 12 years ago now, he had actually perfected the art of making kachi biryani in a massive pressure cooker, which was just massive enough to feed all the members of my extended family for get-together. So, he progressed in his life. But when I was early, like when I was little, this was experimental in kind. So these kachi biryani disasters of my father are actually very much part of my childhood memories. But that was it. That was my melange, different kinds of memories mixed up together.
Yeah, it's sort of when you come from the sort of a multicultural, you grow up in a sort of a multicultural area, the strange things that become your comforts. I mean, even comfort foods. Most people that I come across will talk about things like, in India, things like khichdi and stuff like that as comfort. For me, one of my comfort foods is khaswe.
Oh yes, we cook khaswe too. We make it in Calcutta. Yeah.
It's just a comfort food for me that's rare for the rest of things. It's just that my grandparents lived in Burma.
Yeah.
And my grandfather was in the army.
Yeah.
And therefore, my grandma picked up a lot of that stuff, which then came down in the family. But yes, I think the way that food is cooked and the way that it comes to us, it sort of shapes, like I said, comfort food, for instance, is it's such a subjective kind of concept, right? I mean, it gives me comfort. It doesn't have to. So when, what do you go to in times of needing that comfort? But grow from there to from the food you experienced, if we could sort of grow this conversation a little bit from that part, to the food that you prepared, what were the foods that you first actively prepared?
Mm-hmm.
Would you
Ari,
want
do
to go?
you want to go first?
Um, yeah, well, I mean, for me, I think the first time I cooked for myself, or I cooked, I think it was quite late in my, not late, what is late and what is earlier, I don't know. But I think I was around 21 when I really, because I was in the army, but okay, army, normally they give you food. But when I left the army and I started to uh, live by myself, and that's the first time I started to cook. And before that, of course, I made sure that my sister gave me all the family recipes. So I used to write them in a notebook, and sometimes I used to even call her. I said, okay, now I put the chilies. Now I put the onion. What should I put? So she gave me like online over the phone course how to make food. I think the first food I make it was a beef vindai, as we call it in Pondicherry. That was one of my favorite food till now. It's still like, for me, vindai is the epitome of the Pondicherrian cuisine. So that's so beef vindai was my first food dish I made. But slowly also and to be honest, Peter, it took me almost 40 years, 45 years of my life to come out that Indian taste, the desi taste. For me, everything should have should be desi. Even you make spaghetti has to be desi. I need to put some chilies, I need to put some kurma inside, and that desi taste, it took me 45 years to get rid of that in order to get used to the Western cuisine without mixing, without putting masalas and chilies and this and that. So it's a kind of, it takes a lot of time. It's not that easy to
I
get
don't
rid
even
of.
know why you have to bother. I have no such a fear or shame of mixing things
No,
up.
no, Ananya,
I
it's not, no, it's not a question of, no, no, it's not a question of shame or, no, it's just to, just to try, for example, I moved to Scandinavia 16, 17 years back. And so sometimes they have a very strange food. There's one fish which is called rakefisk. So rakefisk, what is nice? It's a fish that they fish, of course, and they put in the mud for almost 12 months. And normally you have this only during Christmas. And to be honest, when you take out that fish, it stinks like mad. I mean, you have to open all the windows. I mean, can you imagine -25 during winter? You open the entire house in order to eat that fish. It stinks, but the taste is so good. It's a delicatessen. These kind of things you need to, you can't put masala inside. Then you destroy the entire stuff. I know Ananya will disagree, but we always agree to disagree, which is very, very, very fine. So, that way, yeah, it took me a couple of years to get rid of the test, but of course, I like all kind of food, and I cook all kind of food, and I love to cook. It's my meditation for me, as simple as that.
What you're saying about being able to widen your palette, so to speak, palette. Uh, Sorry about that. Is also, if you've grown up in India, your threshold on some tastes is rather high. I mean, scientifically as well, for instance, if you're using a certain amount of chili on a regular basis, your ability to detect subtler notes reduces, because chili, what it does is it anesthetizes, your body anesthetizes your tongue afterwards, right? It's part of the whole pleasure pain kind of thing that happens with chili, which people are addicted to. But your ability to taste subtle things kind of, I mean, for me, for instance, when people talk, I remember there was this dabba that used to come to office, the lunch dabbas of a guy in one of my senior colleagues in my first job, which came from a lady who was doing these health food, very subtly flavored, very low oil. and he would barely touch it, and he would just keep passing it on to me because he says it just all tastes the same. And I could taste a lot of subtle differences because I'm not accustomed. I was one of those few people in a different context who liked hospital food because, in hospital a couple of times I'd been there, there was like, no, you can have some oil and spices. And I'm like, I'm okay with soup. It's fine. It's okay. And they look at me strangely because everybody's fighting to have the spicy, oily food. Yeah. Ananya, what about you and your early memories of first cooking, first preparing?
Being part of such a foodie family where such elaborate food would be cooked. I mean, I haven't even mentioned things like, but as you were talking, I was remembering things, corned beef.
Mhm.
They make corned beef from scratch. It's like a very complicated matter. And this, you have to put the saltpeter, you have to make it sit in salt, you have to do this. This was like a normal affair in my home, in a larger home. Then ox tongue to make another, tripe, whatever it is, it just took like ages to clean and this and that and biryani, So everybody was into these grand food gestures in my family, right? And I therefore just took fright. And even my mother, who I mean, is a great cook, but I mean, as often happens, she was like doing the more mundane things at home, like the fish curry or the rice or something. But even that, so everybody was such a good cook and everybody was so passionate about food that I actually kept away from the kitchen completely while growing up. Naturally, when I came to England when I was 22, I had to start. And then I plunged in and I was, again, like Ari was saying, I have these memories of calls, frantic calls to my mother or letters with things. And, but in fact, I in Oxford, where I lived, I had the very good fortune to hang out with another of your Bombay people. He was my housemate. Maybe you know him, Girish Shahane.
Mhm.
So Girish and I were in the same house. And so we were often cooking together. So sometimes, he was rescuing me because he had already been in Oxford for, I think, 1 or at least 2 years before I arrived. So he had, the ropes. But actually, there was one phase in my life before I left. So the normal thing is for all of us, especially us spoiled women, from middle-class families in India, we don't have to go to the kitchen. So we don't. And then suddenly you're thrown into the deep end when you go abroad. But I did take an initiative. I developed a little niche specialization of my own between the ages of 16 and I would say maybe 2022 when I left India. And that was, I decided was my part that I would develop in my family because everybody else was such experts in everything else. I wasn't going to try to beat them at their game. And this was a two-part gesture. One was Thai food and the other was Chinese food. So I don't know if you remember, Peter, but maybe Ari too, but I don't know how it was. I mean, you were, of course, in France by this time probably. But around the late 80s, this Thai food started entering India, at least Calcutta. I remember going with my family to a Thai food festival at the Oberoi, one of the restaurants there. And this was really the first time. And people from Calcutta also started traveling for holidays to Singapore and Bangkok quite a lot. It's also quite close to our side. It's only 2 hours. And my first Thai food actually that I'd ever tasted was in Dhaka, which is where a lot of my family is. And they had already opened some Thai restaurants there. And I remember in 1984, when I was visiting with my mother and my brother, to actually for the first time try it. So when the Thai food festival started in Calcutta, we were like, yeah, we know this is very good food. Let's go. So in that place, I bought there was, cookbook. And I bought it and I realized that many of the ingredients and the taste is kind of similar yet different, right, to our food. So I began this project of cooking Thai food at home, from scratch, making the green curry and this and this. This was my little zone. So I must have been about 15 or 16 when I started this, and it was quite successful. My, of course, worst was my exacting father presenting anything to him was another. Then when I was about 16, something else happened. I got a Chinese boyfriend. This was also another tamasha. No Indian in Calcutta, no Muslim girls got Chinese boyfriends. Anyway, I did it. So I was like my new cultural anthropology, So I started cooking Chinese food like there was no tomorrow. Going to Tirete Bazaar, old Chinatown, forbidden areas again for many of us. I would just go in the real old Chinese shops in Calcutta. Of course, it was not enough to just have a boyfriend. I had a whole slew of Chinese girlfriends also from my class because they were all very excited at my interest. So I had a number of, ways to observe, to access the resources. Remember, this is a time when none of these things are actually globally available. So you had to go into these alleyways and get these shiitake oyster mushrooms and this and that. Anyway, I became quite an expert even in that. So this Chinese food, I started making things like dumpling wrappers, and rolling them out and making these wontons. And, anyway, this was like crazy. I was obviously into research even at that time. So I developed quite a little sideline in Chinese food and Thai food cooked from scratch to satisfy my own cultural curiosity, and also not be bothered by all these exacting gastronomes in my family who'd be like, but the rice is still a bit hard in the biryani and all that. I was like, forget all that, I'll just develop another game altogether. So that was my little foray into kitchen experimentation, but purely for fun. And then, of course, when I arrived in England, I mean, it was survival. I had to do it like for serious business, but that's another story. That was just trying to do whatever one could in the middle of studying and, learning how to live on one's own and all the rest.
And then, so I mean, it is another story. And yes, that is the story that I want to continue on with, the widening, from the place that you were used to, the place of familiarity, to then go out into a larger world. Both of you moved into other parts of the world fairly young, right? And experienced multiple cultures. And you, I don't know exactly your course, Ari, but with Ananya, London is one of those crossroads of the world. The UK is pretty much a crossroad, thanks to empire and whatnot as well. But you're exposed to not just the culture you go to, but other cultures who are also fitting in and making their homes there. With the French colonial empire as well, you had a lot of people coming in back to France and forming a different kind of culture there. I mean, as most people in India know, for instance, Indian food in the UK is not exactly Indian food. It is a melange of what has happened out there. I mean, aside from the fact that a lot of it was initially cooked by people of Bangladeshi origin, there's a lot there that is in the same way that a pizza in India is different, or Chinese food is different in India, Indo-Chinese food, etc. So what were these other influences that that came to you when you went elsewhere, when you went to other countries, went to other parts of the world?
I mean, for me, as I said in the beginning, Peter, it was not something new. I mean, when I moved to Paris, the food I encountered, it was something I always experienced when I was in Pondicherry. Because, as I said, because of this, all these people are coming back to Pondicherry from different part of the colonial empire. So, for example, Senegali mafe, I already tasted in Pondicherry. Vietnamese cuisine, I already tasted it back in Pondicherry. Guadeloupean, Caribbean food, Polynesian food. So it was not something new that I was encountering. Maybe pizza, maybe was the first thing which was I never tried before moving to Paris. But most of the food was already part of my upbringing. So in that way, there was not kind of this cuisine shock that when you move to the new place that you. So for me, maybe it was really boring because I've already eaten all this food, and then I moved to Paris. Said, okay, so it's like back in Pondicherry, so simple, So there's no new taste. There was some new taste. For example, Japanese food, which I love. That is something I never tried before moving to Paris, and some, like for example, Middle East, not Middle East, but I would say Lebanese food or that kind of food was
I was
not.
just going to say that maybe one of the things that you encountered a lot in Paris, I'm sure, was this whole exposure to different kinds of Arab food and Moroccan, like North African food and so on. That would have been maybe something a little different.
Yeah, but couscous, oh, sorry, couscous we already had in Pondicherry because Papa used to serve in Algeria.
Yeah.
So tagine, this I knew, but mostly the kind of mezze type of thing, that was something new to me. And yeah, for example, Japanese food, Thai food, for example, which was not part of, I think, Vietnamese, yes, but not Thai. Chinese, not that many either, compared to Calcutta, where there's more Chinese community, but on the check there was more Vietnamese community. So yeah, this was, so for me, it was not really new, but of course I discovered other type of cuisine, that's for sure.
I had no clue about the Vietnamese part, being a significant presence in Pondicherry.
Oh yeah, I mean, like as Ananya said, in the 80s, there was a Thai food which was very popular in Kolkata or in India. In 75, because of the situation in Vietnam, in Saigon, so most of the people, the Tamilian who used to live in Saigon came back. They were chased because of the
Yeah.
civil unrest. So
Right.
they came back to Pondicherry and Karikal mainly. They were all mostly from the Muslim community. So
Okay.
they used to live in Vietnam for the last 200 years, part of this French colonial empire. So
Okay.
they moved back to Pondicherry. One of the first things they started to do is to open restaurants.
All right.
So the first restaurant was open, I still remember, was Shamiana. And my father knew the person, his name was Amit Bhai. Amit Bhai, exactly. Amit Bhai opened Shamiana. So mostly, I mean, that's exactly, I wrote in my book also, every week on Wednesday, we used to, Amit Bhai used to send us a full Vietnamese festin at home. So Wednesday, we know that nobody's cooking, it's food from Shamiana. So,
But isn't
so
it
it's,
amazing? I mean, Peter, really, I didn't know this part at all until I met Ari and got more and more insight into this kind of very intricate world of Pondicherry. Like, imagine a Vietnamese restaurant called Shamiana, opened by these Muslim returnees who were there because of the French Empire, connecting Pondicherry and Saigon. I mean, it's just completely mind blowing. Like we think we know a lot about India in all our years of living and being part of the country, but there's always something.
and you won't believe me,
No,
Ananya,
it
but
makes
still now,
sense logically. If you like, the more as Ari was talking, I was like, of course that makes sense. It's not that weird. Yes, French, colonial, Vietnam.
Yeah,
And of course it makes sense, but I just had no clue.
yeah.
even now, Peter, if you go to the Pondicherry market,
Yeah.
that lady she must be around 90s or something like that. And I remember from the 70s itself, she has a small place in the vegetable market. Okay, the grand market in Pondicherry, Guber Bazaar, which I love that. Again, I wrote that in my book, in the French edition. And she still now, she'll be sitting there with her Vietnamese topi and selling just coriander, nothing else.
Okay.
Nothing else. She'll just sell coriander and this, what do you call the part to make the naan. How do you
Yeah.
call it?
It's a kind of the oh God, the dough, like the
Yeah,
wrappers
exactly. So
for the
this is the only two things she sells. Even now, I mean, 4 years back, I was in Pondicherry. So I go there and she was still sitting. She might not sell anything, but she'll be there every day. So that topi, that Vietnamese topi in the middle of everything, it's such a beautiful thing.
Awesome.
Yeah, actually my situation was it's quite interesting. You're quite right, Peter. Living, I mean, it's a different thing to come as a student, to live in to move to a place like Oxford. I spent 2 years in Oxford, and then I was 9 years in Cambridge. So it's a very kind of a bubble like existence, but it's also quite international in its own way. And depending who you're hanging out with, who you find yourself living with, you're living in student houses, you learn quite a lot. So plus, of course, because these are also the bastions of classic British cooking, and we are
Mhm.
eating in halls, and we have the capacity to eat. I mean, if you want to eat cheaply and quickly, you don't want to cook as a student in Oxford or Cambridge, you go to hall and you eat there. So there was that part also, very old fashioned traditional cooking, which very interestingly, because Oxford and Cambridge are very hierarchical places, the food was very bad, usually quite bad for the students. I mean, it wasn't like, what I mean? It was pretty tasteless and boring. But there'll be some exceptions. There were feasts. We had usually religious feasts, obviously, because these are ultimately Christian institutions. So Feast of the Assumption, Feast of the, plus also matriculation, graduation, more like secular kind of academic calendar kind of feast. In those feasts, we would be able to attend in a more elaborate way. You sit down, there are 3 or 4 courses, there's nice wine, and you get a glimpse of a more refined, kind of culture. of a kind of classic British cooking, you know. And then when I was in Cambridge, the year I finished my PhD, I also became elevated, I use the word a bit ironically, to the status of a postdoctoral fellow in my own college, Trinity College, which is got the dubious distinction of being the third richest institution in the UK after the church and the Queen, the monarchy. So part of this is rich, this being so rich is manifested in the institution of the high table, which is where those who are elevated into the fellowship, not the students. So you sit and eat in the grand hall, but there is a low table and a high table. So if you're a student, you're sitting in these long, like it's like a classic medieval thing, you know, long benches, and you're given one kind of food. And then you look at high table, where people are eating palpably a very different kind of food, and it's on a dais. So in one announcement from my tutor, you've got the fellowship, I was elevated from low to high table. This was another situation altogether for 4 years. So very quaint belief that these poverty-stricken PhD students are obviously, some of them have gained through their hard work this singular distinction of becoming part of the fellowship for 4 years. So they have to be stuffed. So part of the salary was actually free meals. If one wanted, one could never cook at all. One would eat breakfast, lunch, dinner for 4 years at high table. One would become very fat and very unfit and very unhealthy because, you know, this was luxurious stuff. So that's where I really understood the secrets of really good, classic, and, you know, technically complicated British cooking, which is also, of course, a bit European because it was not just British, all sorts of things. How courses, you know, the whole sequence of what goes when, what do you eat when, what goes with what. Even old-fashioned things like a fourth course. We think there's usually the entree, you know, the main course and the dessert. But in sometimes there used to also be the fourth course, which is a savory course, you know, if you had any place left. And then after it all, there was this mystery called combination. You went into another room and you combined, where you had port, sherry, claret, blue cheese if it was summer, cheddar cheese if it was winter, no, got the other way around, fruit, cigars, snuff, and then you have to sit and make conversation. This can go until 11. Now imagine that in theory, you could do this every day. Of course, one didn't. But yeah, but this was the real kind of, and also a lot of good wine. So you got exposed. So I would say that I had a very interesting education in learning about some things about which you would have to be in England very, very privileged, frankly speaking. You would have to have come from a very rich family, very old family, to have that kind of exposure constantly, you know, for you, just for the taking. Since I was elevated to this 4-year training, 5 years it became, because I also went to America for a bit and came back. It was a very, very interesting way to understand how things worked in the classic traditional British kitchen, and learned quite a lot in the process, frankly speaking. That was a good education. Some of it, of course, went into my cooking, but not much. Why? Because up till now, I'm not a fan of the oven. I cannot put things in the oven. I find it too hot, too boring, too tedious. And I never cook desserts. So if you did, you'd obviously make cakes and puddings and put things in there. So I'm not an oven person. When I refitted my kitchen, I put the worst oven in. I said, please don't waste money there. Give me a good stovetop because that's what I want. Give a good filter and a good stovetop because that's my cooking. I don't care about the oven. Just make it. And they were like, we have to put an oven. I said, yeah, put it, but you know, it's not going to be really much used. So I'm not really, but I mean, so I didn't use the techniques, but I understood something about stuff. And the other, of course, like Ari, there's Arab food around you. There's all sorts, you know, you absorb, you have friends, they teach you things. I'm a big fan actually of German and North European food because I had again, close friends, the ability to come and go to Germany a lot. I really like German bread. I like German cheese. I like German, you know, I like the way Germans do things. And people think there's nothing called German cuisine, but I can assure you that's wrong. There's great investment in quality and simplicity, and I really like that. And the other culture, food culture, I've been really exposed to since coming to the UK is Italian, because we lived a long time in Italy, coming and going. There's a long story there. But I also learned how things combine. And I think that's the most important thing. If you live in a place and you go to the market and you eat in people's houses and restaurants, you understand there are all kinds of untold secrets about like what shape of pasta combines with what what thickness of sauce. Some things are very gravy-like, some things are more clingy. Some vegetables will never go with some things. Fish will only go with, so these little things, I think just being frequently in Italy, sometimes living there, sometimes coming and going, really taught me a lot. And so I cook a lot of Italian food with chilies and with this and that, like spiced it up. And very much later in my life, in the last 10 years, 10 years, because I've been doing this work with Africa and African heritage stuff in the Caribbean, yeah, my eyes definitely got opened and things came full circle there, because so much of the Caribbean is influenced by Indian food too, So there's a kind of like sudden realization that our food has also traveled and influence other cuisines, and so it kind of all comes together. So I've been quite fortunate in having a number of layers in my kind of culinary journey, coming and kind of just adding to the repertoire, as it were. But I've always been very curious, and I've always been a bit impatient with rules. And if I appreciate that there are rules and you understand, and like the Italian stuff, for example, I feel happy that I know what goes with what and I won't commit any faux pas. But I also understand it's because something tastes good with each other. It's not about saying, they know what goes with what, why one particular pasta shape cannot have a certain kind of sauce. So, okay, fine, I learned that, so I'll do that. So yeah, so it's been quite a fun journey.
Kind of
in all in all.
We feel really that you know the rules and then break them. I mean,
Yeah.
the rules come in for a certain reason.
Yeah.
They exist because that works. That's
Yeah.
why they've got codified, whether informally or formally.
Yeah.
And if you learn by rote, you're never going to get that. You will just say, okay, no, this is what I have to do. But if you know that you put the onions in at this stage because you need them to get a little caramelized before
Yeah.
you put the rest in,
Yeah.
then you know that if you want that, that's what you've got to do. If you don't want the caramelization, you can eliminate that.
Yeah.
And I mean, for someone like me who learned to cook rather late, much later than you, Ari, the thing was that I had to learn a lot of stuff by rote because that was the easiest way. I didn't absorb a lot of these things by just being around, because I mean, my role at home at the table was to sit down and eat. Really, my mother tried to teach me a few things.
Peter, tell us a little bit about what you ate when you were growing up. I'm very curious. What was your favorite stuff? What was being cooked at home?
So my family is Anglo-Indian with with sort of roots going partly in my dad's family was my grandfather was in the British Army telegraphs. My mother's family, my mother's father was in the Indian Railways, the British Rail at that point. So both were families that moved around a fair bit.
Yeah.
Right. And absorbed multiple things. I mean, there are foods that I would eat and I was like, I'd eat something right now and find that this tastes familiar, but it's actually a Bengali dish. And I realized that, that came from that part of the family. I had no idea, for instance, that khaswe was not an Anglo-Indian food till I figured it out, because to me, that was one of the things that we ate.
Yeah.
It took some time, it was prepared. So yeah, so when we moved, my family also, I moved away from core family, my extended family when I was about 3 years old. My parents moved to Sikandrabad, then to Madras, and then to Bombay. So I didn't grow up with other Anglo-Indians around that. In fact, most of the time I wound up explaining what Anglo-Indian meant, right? And you say Anglo-Indian and they say Mangalorean. No, I say Anglo-Indian.
That's a good one.
No, it's just a question of what's familiar. If you're in Bombay, unless you grew up in the Baikala area, which was the railway town, part of the town, the railway cantonment, exactly. There were a lot of Anglo-Indians, you would just not have encountered the concept. So it's a perfectly legit thing. All the Christian names that were not Indian names, right, tended to be Goan, Mangalorean, East Indian. So your mind automatically slots people in one of those if you've never encountered it. If you're from Cal or Bangalore, you're more likely to have experienced the Anglo-Indian community, right?
Yeah.
When you are because there were larger concentrations of Anglo-Indians in those places. So food for me at home, it was the thing of eggs for breakfast and toast and things like that. And a whole lot, we ate a lot of red meat. when I was
Mhm.
growing up. One meal had red meat in it always.
Yeah.
It could be much later, I think, when my parents were in their 40s and developed things like high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, and all that. They cut down the amount of red meat they were eating. And at a point, I realized that it was being largely cooked for me. And when I said, why are you doing this? I'll eat what you're eating. You don't need to cook separately from me, right? So, and I consequently cut down my consumption of red meat as well to now. Then I eat meat maybe once a week or so. But so things like the Anglo-Indian national dish
Mhm.
for Sundays is coconut rice, ball curry, devil chutney. You familiar with those, right?
Yeah,
Indeed, we
absolutely.
are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the same, not the coconut rice, but of course, the so-called ball curry is very popular in Calcutta amongst the groups that I'm talking about. We call it kofta curry.
Yeah.
Same thing. And I know that in Pondicherry they make it too. That was one of the things that Ari and I
Yeah,
discussed.
we call it
Called it
undaka.
ball, so the Anglo people call it ball curry purely so that they could say bad word curry.
But Peter, what do you mean bowl curry is like the round shape?
Yeah,
Meatballs.
yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
only
exactly.
thing.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
Sundays, same thing in Pondicherry is where the ball is in Tamil means unda. So
Yeah.
it's unda curry. So unda curry is their Sunday dish.
It would be a lot of stews,
Yeah,
brown stews, the Irish stew, dumpling stew.
yeah,
Uh, what I didn't realize was not exactly Anglo-Indian, a sort of a mole, uh,
yeah.
you know, that kind of thing, a greenish gravy kind of thing. A lot of the chili fry, just fried beef with onions and a little chili and that kind of. My family was unusual amongst a lot of the Indian community that none of us liked our food very spicy. So I've grown up with a very
Oh
low
yeah.
tolerance to chili.
Mhm.
Chili just destroys a meal for me. I can't taste anything if I eat a chili. Okay, because my threshold is a bit lower on that. The moment if I bite into a chili, I need a glass of water, a glass of milk, and solitude for a little while.
Yeah.
Because I sort of turned red and then my eyes will start watering, and it's rather embarrassing to be that and live in India. you know, I'm very adventurous when it comes to food. Whenever I've traveled around India, I will always say, "What are you eating? Let me have that." And then I have to sort of say, "And can you please just keep the mirchi low because otherwise I might die."
Actually, Pete, it's very interesting. Did you grow up with this curry, which seems to be also quite popular amongst, at least I've seen it in other recipe books and so on, stuffed snake goat curry?
Yeah, I've had that.
Yeah, that's the podolongai stuffed.
Ah,
Because we've been tracking this curry, Ari and I, for our
Oh yeah,
work.
yeah. That was
It's
amazing.
another very fascinating development, this podulungai, which is the word for snake goat in Tamil. And this is a very popular in Pondicherry. It's obviously, then I discovered it's quite an Anglo-Indian thing. And we don't really do it in Calcutta, but instead we stuff the palwal, So it's something is stuffed, a goat is stuffed, but it's not that goat. So we've been very fascinated by the stuffed snake goat curry. And that's why I had to ask you that it seems that this must have been at some point in your childhood as well.
But that's
variations
one
of
thing
what
that
kind of washes and gourds and all that very much appeared in part of the thing. One of the things we used to make was also this sort of the brinjal cutlet where you cut the brinjal in half, you take out the stuffing, you mix it with other stuff, you put the stuffing back, and then you put a lid of basin flour or something like that to seal it.
Ah,
Then
okay.
fry that on both sides.
Interesting. This is a new one for me. Ari, do you have anything like that in your
no, no.
horizon? No.
But we have aubergine
Yeah.
farci. We have
Aubergine farci, yes.
aubergine farci. We have that you take out the flesh and you put minced meat inside,
Yeah.
and yeah, that we have
Yeah.
aubergine farci.
And I was never terribly fond of brinjal. I have this sort of which I something I've worked on psychologically. I don't enjoy it, but I can eat it now. But I don't like squishy foods.
Interesting.
Uh,
Interesting.
I would throw up when trying to eat brinjal as a child. So
It's a
I
very
worked
fishy
on it. Yeah, I worked on it. I conquered that. But my mother used to make a variation of this for me because of the brinjal issue by scooping out tomato
vegetable. Mhm.
That with the mix of tomato and the inside of the, the inside of the tomato plus mincemeat and
We do that.
sealing that. So my mother would make that variation for me because I couldn't handle the brinjal. I would throw up. Yeah.
That was very common in my family as well. Stuffed tomatoes with the mincemeat stuffed inside it. And I see a chat comment from Pratibha that it is like the Greek. Yeah, actually, Pratibha, this is what Ari and we worked out through our research, because the idea of stuffing vegetables of any kind with mincemeat or anything and then cooking it again is really a Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean thing, Greek, Turkish. Then from the Turkish Ottoman world, it came to the Armenians, and the Armenians most probably 99.99% were the ones who actually got that technique and that idea to India. And then we traced how it caught on, again, through this gray town, people of a certain kind hanging out together, really became very popular. Different kinds of vegetables stuffed became very popular amongst all these communities. We were Anglo-Indians and the Calcutta Jewish communities also stuffed things in exactly the same way. It's very fascinating. So Pratibha, it is the Greeks, kind of, it's all part of that same.
But I think, Ananya, you agree that that was the most fascinating part that you and me, we wrote.
Yes.
That from that it took us almost like 3 weeks just to do research on that. And every day I will call Ananya, I found this. And she, like 2 minutes after, said, oh, look at this. So she'll be something. So, put all this thing.
I think only the two of us could get so excited about snake gourds. Like, oh my God, this is so exciting. So,
and then we trace it down to Reunion Island, where there was even a proverb in Kreyol, and talking about the snake gourd. And that was the most...
Like basically, the Creole proverb said that if don't train the snake gourd, it'll become all crooked, because the whole idea is that it goes into all these kind of strange shapes, right? But the fascinating thing is that the word that they use in Creole of Reunion to call snake gourd, I mean, the word they use is potol, which is the word for pointed gourd, parwal in Bengali. And how the potol and the podulangai and all these gourds got all mixed up somewhere. The main thing is, imagine how fascinating this is, Peter, that somewhere in India, and this is the work we do, I mean, thinking about what is Creole, what is Creolization. It's really try new tricks with different kinds of ideas and materials and techniques you already have in your bag. So as Pratibha has just said, it is certainly from the Eastern Mediterranean, Greek, there were some Greeks also, of course, trading and in Calcutta and in Bombay and all that. So the Mediterranean lot got the idea of dolmas, of things, stuffing mincemeat, etc., in vegetables. They used vine leaves, of course, classically, which we don't really have in plentiful supply here in India. So obviously people were thinking about substitutes or experimenting with, hey, what else could we do? Don't forget that tomatoes came in quite recently into India, obviously, not like around the early 19th century. People were still, even today, Bengali Hindu families call tomatoes the foreign vegetable. And typically in Calcutta, in Bengal, Bengali Hindu families don't really like to put tomatoes in their fish dishes because it's kind of foreign. Of course, the Bengali Muslims are doing everything with everything. So we have so that's not a problem for us. But this is very fascinating that they still have a memory that it's kind of a new entrant into the world. So it must have been quite glamorous to stuff a tomato and present it, in these like dining tables. But the common vegetable is the gourd. Gourds have been cultivated. This is the research that Ari and I did for thousands of years in the Indic world. And we have any number of gourds. But the good thing about the gourd is that they can hold their shape when you put them in a curry, you see. So we also want to make a curry out of them. So the Greek people and the Armenians are not making a curry. They're just stuffing it. And then they're just, as we know, they're served in rolls or they're discrete. But we want our gravy because we then want to mix it up with our coconut rice and all the rest. So we are really... people were on the hunt for an indigenous vegetable, which would not only bear the weight of the stuffing, but then hold its shape in the cooking. And so the gourds turned out to be the most handy of it all because they ticked all the boxes. So there are some interesting recipe books in Bengali from the early 20th century, late 19th century, where they're actually explaining how you hollow out a gourd to stuff it. Like it was like a new thing. People didn't know. They were probably chopping it up and making little sabzis out of it. But now they're like, don't chop it up. Take the whole thing, slowly scoop out the insides with a little hole in the top, then insert your stuffing. So it's quite interesting that people were really hitting on this idea as a kind of brainwave. And that's what that's the idea of creolization that we use to explain these brainwaves. So the snake gourd is part of
Only
that.
to that part of that, since that's our alibi for this conversation, is the entire your project, Le Thinnai Kreyol, and how that goes. And so, uh, one of this whole notion that you have in a lot of places of purity and authenticity, etc. Which is completely counter to the way things have actually happened in the world. We influence one another, we learn from another. A technique comes in from another place. It comes to India where you're living in a tropical climate, therefore things don't keep that long. So you've got to figure out other ways to prepare those same things. You adapt. But
Yeah.
let's get to your interest in this particular word, Creole. Could we define that? And why has it become a project for you? Could you get into that, please?
Ananya, you start this time.
Okay, you feel free to interrupt me because I can go on and I want you to, but I'll also explain where Ari came in. So the point is that I'm an academic. So as you've obviously noted from my story of my food memories and my food life, I mean, I'm very interested in food, and I'm very interested in how food can be a way to, just like learn more about where you live in, make the world your own. I mean, you're not moving around, you want to feel comfortable. Food is the way you do it. So the flexibility of food was always fascinating for me, and the histories food contains, words that you use for things that come through multiple languages and all that. So somewhere down the line, I started getting interested in creolization, which is like a whole academic set of theories about explaining how exactly cultures mix, mingle, encounter each other and change each other. So it's like a theory and explanation for cultural change. How do you track it and under what conditions? So, like all academic theories, it has some purpose of explaining the world. So the interesting thing about Creole is that creolization is the theory, is the process, is the more academic word, but there are any number of people around the world who call themselves Creole, or call their language Creole, or call their food Creole. So the word is also a descriptive word for a great number of people in the world who are not thinking about theory, they're just living their lives. So there is Creole as a kind of identity. And it's a very interesting word because what exactly is Creole is not the same from place to place. A Creole in Cape Verde and a Creole in Malacca and a Creole in Pondicherry and a Creole in Jamaica, are not the same components that have gone in to make them Creole, but somehow there's a similarity of process, and that's the parallel that throws that word out. And in history has made that word applicable to these people, or they've adopted it for themselves. And what is that word? Where does it come from? It literally is a word which has itself been born out of those processes. So we must remember that around the 15th century, Europeans started moving out of Europe in what is called the European expansionism, trade, colonialism, whatever. And they were fanning out across the Atlantic and then eventually around the Cape of Good Hope with Vasco da Gama and the Portuguese into the Indian Ocean world as well. And in this process, obviously, travel takes time in the age of the sail of ship. So people are not coming and going, they're settling, So when they settle, there are things that happen in your life cycle. You die, you marry, you have children, you set up, you create new communities, you meet other kinds of people and you forge intimacies with them. So there's all this like newness that's being produced, new communities that are being produced, because this push outward of Europe has created chain reactions, and people are going and settling and making lives for themselves in new places. Slave trade, people who are enslaved are being brought from A to B. So there's a lot of movement and a lot of kind of figuring things out. And people are doing it together in communities. And that's Creole, So Creole communities are born out of this push and pull, this movement, this getting to know each other, sharing the same space violently, uncomfortably, but also we've got to make the best of it, desire, sexual attraction, violence of different kinds. So all sorts of intense emotions are there in Creole. And that's what creates Creole communities. So Creolization is an academic way of thinking about the processes that went on to create Creole communities. And some of these processes spill over beyond those communities and start impacting people who live around those communities, maybe not biologically part of that process, but culturally they've somehow become, it's porous, and they've kind of become part of that world. So that's what I got more and more interested in, not least because I recognized a lot of it of my own life in there, as we've been talking. Met Ari, and I realized that Ari's books are pretty much about the same thing, because there is a Creole community in Pondicherry and there's Creolization in Pondicherry. And so we sort of gelled as people interested in the same things that not a lot of people want to even acknowledge. And it's the same reason why we are sitting and talking with you. We are all from a similar mindset. We are born out of a similar kind of place in this space we call India, or we are aware of certain things. So that's really what brought Ari and me together. And we realized this was very important to have a space to talk about these things freely, to share our memories, to draw other people in so that they could feel comfortable, feel valued. We're talking about things that very often are considered impure, as you said, shameful, not upper class or caste, or not privilege. This is about lack of privilege and people making lives out of lack of privilege. So people are being killed now in our country for these foodways. Forget about just feeling shameful. You're actually now in fear of your life. So we wanted to have a space where we could give value to these things which are important for us, but also we know for other people. And so the Thinnai Kreyol project was born from there. And it was born out of conversation, very much like your project. So I'll just, maybe Ari, you want to add to that, because I've just given my version of the story. You should give yours.
Yeah. But I mean, no, that's why, when we talk about food, which is our main subject. Like when I started to write my first book is about Kane Sukha Lakshmi, which is like a philosophical fable, as I said. But the second book, I wanted to make it give more power to the Pondicherry culture, which is something very unique, not only in India, but also in the post-colonial or colonial environment. And in order to give that, one need to know, one need to live in Pondicherry, and also understand the cultural impact of colonialism in Pondicherry. Not only talking, okay, the French people came, okay, they colonized us, okay, they left, and then we got independence, and that's it. This is a very narrow way of thinking. And also, like for 350 years, when the French people stayed in Pondicherry, so many books has been written, but no books is talking about what Pondicherryans eat. Is as if like I was eating poulet roti and baguette, you see, or just rice. And I mean that's what you expect Indian to eat. It's rice and sambar or baguette and poulet roti. But no books has been talking about the Pondicherry culinary tradition. And that was very, very important to me to place it in my book. What we are eating is what we are. That's the way I need to explain to the world that this colonial encounter created a uniqueness, not only in India, in the world, this kind of food tradition. So almost Ananya knows that a full chapter is written only about food, all kind of food that we are eating. And in order to explain that, I introduced this Creole character who called Loud Mascareña. And why, again, that Creole character? Because, again, for 350 years, nobody has written about them. As if this Creole community doesn't exist in Pondicherry. And they are there. They were totally ignored, neglected, and nobody talked. Even any books mention the word Creole community. There are some academics book or some historical book. They just mention, okay, they are Creole in Pondicherry, but without explaining who are these people, what did they do, nothing. So for me, it was important that, again, that uniqueness in Pondicherry was important to put that. So that's why I created that character. And she's part of the family and she's the cook. You see, that's exactly how I link the gastro memory with a community which was neglected for 350 years. So in that way, I think Ananya was one of the reasons she got attracted, first of all, because the Creole word is mentioned in that book. There's a Creole character which is part of the book, and the Creole food is part of the book. So for her, it's like, okay, I got everything. I get everything in one book. This man, I should get him. So this is how,
yeah.
so this is how we get to know through my book. And during the pandemic, actually, we were supposed to meet for a beautiful event that Ananya organized, organized for in Paris, but we couldn't meet. So out of frustration, and one day I called, he said, listen, this thinnai, actually, you know what is a thinnai? You lived in Chennai, Madras, so you know what is a thinnai. Why don't we make this thinnai as a virtual thinnai? Let's invite the world to come and sit on my thinnai. And she said, yes, it's a good idea. But since it's your thinnai, let me bring my Creole concept. You see, it's of course I'm inviting her. She just cannot come and say, oh, wait, let me sit here. So she came with that concept of Kreyol. So this is how we merge into thinnai Kreyol, her concept and my thinnai. So here we are.
And like so many interactions and collaborations and partnerships that we're seeing happening in our world now, you two have never met physically.
No.
It's been
No.
met entirely.
No.
And it's coming very soon. It's coming
Well,
very
fingers crossed. Don't jinx it now.
It's coming very soon.
Jinx it. Don't jinx it.
You know, and God, that's like, yeah.
Well, it's been really fascinating how we get to know each other. I mean, of course, this is a very interesting and obvious case, but so many people like yourself, Peter, this community you created, thousands of people now in it, intimate details about their family lives and parental problems and children and aunties and whatnot. I mean, that's what I find the most fascinating about this Simple Recipes group. People have just very quickly stopped talking just about recipes. They have to, because you've kept the law there that we must write about some recipe. But it's like a trapdoor is open. People are talking about all sorts, and people feel comfortable to do it amongst a massive group of strangers. You're just revealing so much about yourself. So I think we've really redrawn the boundaries in the pandemic of how we feel close to each other. How can we feel we know each other? I mean, honestly, even midway through when nothing was ceasing last year, I was getting quite frustrated. I was even putting in a big grant application, which didn't come through in the end, where Ari had a part to play. And I was thinking to myself, my God, I'm like putting in for a 5-year grant with somebody I've never met, who, if we get the project, he would be like, there would be massive funding to do work together. And how weird, because in the previous year, you'd be meeting people, you'd be having serious discussions, whatever. You couldn't think of moving forward without physical meetings. Now we had no option because, well, we can't have physical meetings, so are we not going to move forward? So we became very close in a very extraordinary way. And that's perhaps, again, facility, adaptability of human nature that we have been surprising ourselves with in so many different ways during this year. I feel I know so much about Ari now, but maybe it is redundant to see him in person.
Once she sees me, say, oh my God. Oh my God. What have I got into?
People in their 20s now, maybe early 30s, sort of grew up with the internet at home. I mean, if you were sort of middle income, you're likely to have had some form of internet in your home from the point pretty much always.
Yeah.
And their attitude towards online collaboration and online relationships, really, not collaboration, relationships, being able to interact, is very different. I'm sort of weird in the sense that because of the way that I am mentally in my makeup, I found a lot of comfort and ability to interact with in the online world, which I'm not very good at doing face to face, right? I get a little tongue tied, I get thing, but the internet with me mostly, I mean, not in this case, the conversation we're having, but a lot of stuff is asynchronous. It is, you have time, you can frame a response, you can put that version of your best self that meets this conversation forward a lot better. And
Mhm.
a lot of people who are not in their 20s and 30s now, a bit older, who have who sort of adapted to this, didn't grow up with it,
Yeah.
adapted to this somewhere midway in their working lives and careers and whatnot, and treated it a little bit gingerly, perhaps. And this time, this international, I mean, this worldwide pandemic, this lockdown, this everything, where all of us, many of us have had to look at this again and realize that, yes, it is kind of possible. You can do a lot without ever actually meeting. It doesn't have to have the foundation of a meeting below it, right? But tell
Sure.
me more about the project and how it's gone.
It's going very, very good. I mean, like you, we we also have a community, what we call the thinnai community, who are loyal followers and friends, become friends, and the validation that we get, it's really amazing. There is no one out there that we invited even without knowing them. Like like big personalities. Like for example, we are inviting for in our next season Amitabh Ghosh, the writer, and then in Googie. So these people don't know who we are, but when we reach out to these people by explaining the project, immediately they said, okay, we are coming. We come and sit on Thinnai. So that validation is the artwork that Ananya and I, we put, the kind of trust that people have on us, that these people are not just here to entertain in the sense, because there's the seriousness of our project, be it academic or even intellectual. So this is what I think we both of us achieved, and gives us lot of uh, self-satisfaction.
I think one thing there I want to react to the thing where you said, see, you used these words, you used serious, you used intellectual, you used academic. Those could be off-putting to a lot of people, but I haven't been able to attend too many because it clashes with stuff I do.
Yes.
So I've attended maybe two, I think, or three, but
Yeah.
it may be grounded, it may be founded in an intellectual pursuit, in an academic way of looking at things, in a serious dialogue. But what happens at your events is by no means the dull thing that one might imagine if one only saw those words in isolation, right? It's fun.
Yeah, yeah. I really enjoy that so much about what we do, because I think I was a bit surprised that Ari was flagging up these other very large and heavy words, because of course they are there. They're the bedrock of, I mean, it's it's a serious project because, as we talked earlier, there's a serious political need for alternative spaces. There's an urgency which the pandemic made things possible which we didn't even know would be possible. So that's great. Out of this misery or this frustration of being locked down and not being able to see each other physically, we nevertheless found solutions. And those solutions answered a need, which is a serious need, to have these other spaces of discussion, valorization, validation, and so on. Excavation, whatever. Um, Academic, because yeah, I'm an academic, so the work I do is definitely grounded in research. I mean, that's my job, that's how I make my living. So I'm trained, my brain is trained to ask certain questions, and then I can't help but find the answers in a certain way, which, like it or not, is going to be academic. As for Ari, interestingly enough, while he's not an academic, he writes historical fiction, so there's an element of research, finding out, digging things out. So so the foundation of our work, how we get our knowledge, is certainly in a way from academia and academic. why we want to do it is certainly serious. But the most important point is when we project our materials to the world, when we invite people to converse with us, when we have our own chats and events, something else happens. And it's not like we sat and we decided that that was our manifesto. We will be fun, we will not bore people. We never did that. We are just ourselves. And because we have an interest in each other as human beings, we like each other, we are also interested in finding out about each other and being friends and being collaborators and being close. Obviously, that kind of vibe projects in the world, and we make people comfortable because we want to be comfortable with ourselves. And we don't take ourselves seriously. The work is serious, but we don't want to think that we are so grand. So we pull each other's leg, we tease each other, we are just having a laugh, we're joking. And I think that kind of vibe relaxes people. And we certainly need that because we don't have the embodied warmth that sometimes relaxes people without words when you're in a group. When you're in a group, as you know, if you're at a dinner party, there's a way a host will just, very unobtrusively say, are you okay? Just make people comfortable. We can't do that because we don't have the physical means, but we can somehow, in the way we interact online, do that work. And this is, I think, what has happened. People have been drawn into our world because they, maybe out of idle curiosity, they've dropped by, they've found something. Oh, how interesting. These people are just having a laugh. They're enjoying themselves. They're making each other laugh. So through the medium, I think, of affection, humor, relaxation, we are trying to do two things. We are curious about many things, as you are, Peter. So we want to bring the fruits of that curiosity to others. Hey, we found this out about snake gold. Come and learn about it. We are convinced that there is while we are also making people enjoy themselves and forget the pandemic woes and have a moment of lightness and connection, the things we are talking about and the issues we are interested in are also serious ones. And therefore, there's that second thing that we're doing, making that space, giving people validation. And thirdly, we are helping people connect with each other. So then we started curating events. And Surabhi's here. Surabhi was a part of one of our events where we showed her films. And we also made her talk to a Surinamese musician and singer, Raj, whom, as it so happened, she had actually had a connection with about 10 years ago, maybe, but it had not really gone very far. But now the two were back together on our thinnai, So we bring people together and then other people get to know each other. So it's a network creation as well. So I think that the project has succeeded. We didn't have a plan for it. We were just like, let's do something. Then it kind of, got its own momentum again, as you know from your own experience, a momentum that's usually actually the energy is churned and generated by others.
Yes.
You, Peter, can't just keep the group going all by yourself. If there was no interest in it, it would have packed up and dried up on its own accord. But people took that resource. Something about the way you were presenting the group made people feel comfortable, and then it took its own life. So same thing happened with our thinnai. We maybe micromanage it a bit more because we have a lot more live events, and that's like a raison d'etre. We don't really have the space where people are writing. Different people have different rationales and modus operandi for their groups, and ours is a bit different from yours. But that crowd-funded nature, of the momentum is, I think, very similar. People enjoy it. People enjoy our thinnai Kreyol. So it's carrying on. And, and let's see where it goes, but we really have a lot to share and people want us to keep sharing. We took a little break for a few weeks because of the summer. And I think people are just like, well, you're coming back.
Where are these two?
Where you talk about, these things that in this era, that this kind of, even what we're doing now and what thinnai is all about and all of that is this combination of things. This is a sort of a hybrid of your older talk shows, right?
Yeah.
It's not quite a talk show. It's not quite a podcast. It is that kind of mix of all of these things. It is in that kind of way, a hybrid, a Creole kind of way of presenting.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not trying to be one or the other things. It is taking inspiration and taking stuff from multiple ways and trying to be something on its own, right?
Yeah.
So actually, one of the things I was going to ask you at the beginning was at the back of my head was, how is this advancing your individual research and things like that? And then I realized that no, actually, this is multiple things. It is an end in itself for one, right? It is what it is. Of course, as thinking human beings, it will advance your own practices, your own
Absolutely.
thinking, but it's also building community, it's building thought. And one of the things that you touched on is that it's looking at difference from a space that says, let me try and understand this, and let me share that understanding with other people, rather than retreating into polarized positions, which I think is hugely important. That you're saying that let's look at what happens when you aren't polarized. Let's look
Yeah.
at what happens when things get thrown together,
Mm.
right? For whatever reason. I mean, a lot of Creole culture is a result of colonial ambition and oppression and a whole lot of other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we
Yeah.
continue to live with that, or do we move forward and say, this is what it is, now let's see,
Mhm.
right? And that's what I found fascinating about this. But tell me about some of the conversations you've had so far and what's coming up perhaps.
Ari?
Yeah, I mean, we had fantastic guests the last almost over more than a year now. And what we are more interested is, of course, literature, film, dancers, all kind of cultural
People who
entrepreneurs.
cook, different kinds of people interested in food. We have
That's why we have a different subject, like we have the thinnai cuisine, for example, so which is totally only focused on food. And so most of the guests that we are having, they are either writing about food, or they are cooked themselves, or something, or everything around around food. And then we have thinnai matine, which is film. So we show the film, and we invite the filmmaker with some other guests to have a discussion. And then what else do we have? Tine Kacheri.
yeah.
Tine Kacheri again. Kacheri is a Tamil word for concert, but in Bengal, it's a court, right, Ananya?
Yeah, like a court where you debate and discuss and
Exactly.
litigate and all that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's what we are doing. So we've been having fascinating guests from all type of
Well,
say sorry
different parts of the world. I mean, from
yeah,
all
yeah,
over
different
the
part of
world.
the world, different background, and writers and dancers and whatnot. So, and we are the curated events are very well organized by Ananya and me. And then once in a month, no, is it once in a month or twice a month?
Twice a month.
Twice a month, we go live on just spontaneously on that. We don't invite anyone. Just there's Ananya and me, and we just go on and talk. Simple.
Those actually, Peter, have so many more views than the curated events that we struggle, and we kind of really like work hard to get together, because as you know, to invite people, you have to work a little harder than just
Yeah.
saying, I'm just going on. So we basically, it was all, again, not really like we never sat and we did a map for all this. It evolved in the course of the first few months. We realized this was a rhythm. Every alternate Friday, we did a curated event. Sometimes, as in the case of the event with Surabhi, for people aren't available, so we may do it on a Saturday. But basically, the Sunday, alternating with these Friday or Saturdays, is a Sunday event where Ari and I just rock up, And this is the reason why we couldn't come to some of your earlier table talks, because they're exactly the same time on those fortnightly Sundays. And that's where we literally just convene, and we don't even, in the beginning, now I must say that being an academic does have its disadvantages. You're always a bit, where's my prep? I haven't prepared. Ari was like, don't be ridiculous. Just, we just go and talk. So I've become much more relaxed about everything, thanks to him. So thank you. And so this Thinnai Adda is another one of those. We just go there. We call it the Thinnai Adda, which Adda is just this chit chat. So Now the community, again, the people who come regularly, they definitely, they turn up, and people also see things on replay. So, it doesn't matter how many people come or not. It's always, we can track the replays, and they're really popular. And we have no idea what we're going to talk about. Typically now it's become, we are both doing our, reading, writing, some things are exciting, something we end up discussing about who's going to come next as our guests in the next week. So if this is a Sunday, then on Friday, we're going to have an event, Friday coming. So we'll introduce people to it. But, we really enjoy that. And then, of course, again, people may have some comments or questions, which they put in the chat or the comments, and we take them. So we ventriloquize them. They can't speak to us, but they're writing to us, and we address them as the comments come.
Sometimes you also invite people on.
And you can sometimes invite people to come in on video, like, as the technology is there. So it's very free flowing and really depends on the vibe and our mood, but they're usually really fun. And then the Friday or Saturday, the curated events are a little more, they're also fun, but they're of course a little more directed, because there's a reason we've invited people and we want to ask them questions about that, their work and all the rest, and we theme it a little bit. Again, those things are curated by Ari and me. We brainstorm, we have weekly meetings where we who do we want, why do we want? So in this who do we want thing, we have different kinds of motivations. Ari comes from a traditional, the community that Ari's from is the so-called Pariya community. So there's this link with Dalit assertion, and Dalit consciousness. So we want to use our space to give place for that. So that's very important for us. I like the fact that I knew no Tamil at all before I met Ari, and it opens up another linguistic place for me. So we try to have some, Tamil speaking, somebody from the Tamil speaking world, which of course is vast. It's not just restricted to India. Since we talk about Creole, there are Creole islands in the Caribbean, in the Indian Ocean, in the Pacific too, where Indians have gone and Creolized. So we try to bring some people from those places together. And of course, we're just interested in people and things. So for example, coming up, we've got Amitav Ghosh. Now, Amitav Ghosh, I don't know whether he's used the word Creole in his writings, but he's writing about these things all the time. So we are really keen that come and tell us, talk to us about your work through this lens. And to make that more explicit, we invited a very well-known academic and anthropologist from Oslo, Thomas Eriksson, who has done a lot of work on climate change, creolization, Seychelles, Mauritius, and so on. And as it often happens, Surabhi and Raj, it happened with them also. They're like, yeah, we really would like to talk to each other, but we know each other. Amitav has been reading Thomas's work. Thomas, of course, has read Amitav's books. They're like, we'd love to be in the same space. So that's the way, we do that. Now, Amitav Ghosh is more famous than famous. Thomas is also a very well-known academic, but it's not enough for us to only have the big names, We also want to give space for people who might be lesser known for whatever reason, but we like their work. So we would like to have people who are upcoming, people who have just made a new film and we think it's important. So it's the entire spectrum. This new season, we're also we got very interested in the Malabar coast as a space again of old initial creolization, with the Luso Indian community that sprang up there and different kinds of comings and goings of people. So we want to have some events around the Malabar coast, and we're trying to work out if we could actually have like people walking around Fort Kochi while we are trying to, involve them in an event. So can it be a little more mobile than just statically us sitting? So we're working on these things. So, there are different ways in which we are using our slots, which people now expect will be populated with events. We're trying to become a little more daring with them. Let's see how they work. And if not, it was an experiment. Whatever works, we take forward. Whatever doesn't work, people still, experience something. So that's what's planned. We typically announce the season. Also, we've got a Facebook page, and that's really pretty much the hub of activities. We also put everything simultaneously on YouTube, and it remains easily accessible for people as replays, both on Facebook and YouTube. So, it's quite, hopefully, people just find us like that, and we announce the season and everything. It's very oral, we like to talk about things. So typically when we have our adda, we'll tell people what's coming up. We'll have a poster and a flyer, but we'll also talk about it. So there are different ways in which people will know what we do.
Exactly, yes. I mean, people, I think one of the things I was thinking of here is that in many points, thanks to the worlds I have inhabited, I know a lot of people in publishing and writers and stuff like that. And always like, are you turning simple recipes into a book? And I was like, doesn't have to be. For one, you can't reproduce that, right? The vibe that's there. And it exists and in itself as a community.
Yeah.
There can be things that grow from it, as indeed this conversation is something that has grown from that. And there will be others. I know people there whose writing has attracted the attention of people who value good writing, and there are people who've been in touch with them and that kind of thing. But that's good. But yeah, the just a reminder to folks in the audience, if you have questions, raise hand on the Zoom raise hand, or leave a comment in the Q&A or the chat. And if you'd like to join in on voice, just use the Zoom raise hand gesture, and we can we can allow you to talk. And let us know if you'd like to come on video as well. But I'm very conscious also that unlike the usual table talk, which we've gone on for as long as 5 hours for one of them.
Ari has visitors. Ari's niece is visiting, and she's just arrived. No.
Yeah, we can't go on much longer than the scheduled 2 hours that we have. In fact, I'm grateful that Ari is still here, because Ananya did tell me that he might have to leave before the 2 hours was over. So thank you for staying, Ari. But if you have questions and comments, we have Ananya and Ari with us for another 15 minutes for sure. And beyond that, it depends on the calls on their time, right? So
that's why I say I need to leave in 10-15 minutes. So
yeah.
it's okay.
So we have both of them here for that much time. Maybe Ananya may be able to stay a little bit beyond that, but both have very crowded days. So if you do have questions, comments, or if you just like to join in the chat, let us know.
It doesn't have to be questions. We can just hear from people and their views.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. So, sir, if you want to come on, since you've talked to each of us separately and whatnot, just let me know, right? But yes, so like I said, things grew from the community, right? And in simple recipes, what are the things that for you are the possible avenues that you're seeing now after it's about a year of
a year. Yeah.
What are you seeing now differently that you weren't seeing when you started?
Ari, I want to know.
To be honest, as Ananya said, we just spontaneously thought about this project, and maybe I didn't know, to be honest. I was not even expecting that we're gonna go over a season. You see, for maybe we would have done that like for 3 months. Okay, we've done that, and because also the unstable situation at that time, because we didn't know how long this pandemic will go on. So I said, okay, let's do that. Let's start something. Maybe after 3 months, we'll just wrap up and we'll meet. So another story. So, but it went on, and so it's still going on. You see, that's one thing that I'm very surprised. But mostly, what I understand is about the Creole culture itself, because even though I used to be exposed to Creole communities like from French Caribbean, mostly from Martinique, Guadeloupe, but I was not really interested to analyze or to understand the creolization process, you see. And only by meeting Ananya, I understood not only the creolization process, but the political implication of Creole. That's what I'm still amazed. I got totally dragged into that and even start to write in Creole and make it a political statement. And so that is what I really like in this project, because that political awakeness was not in me as something. So I think I need to thank Ananya for that, because otherwise, for me, Creole is Creole food. I would have eaten some boudin, here and there, some Colombo from Guadeloupe and some Rugai from Réunion, and that was it. So in that way, yes, I'm very much grateful to Ananya.
Well, that's very sweet of you. Thanks. But it was really quite a kind of like co-learning, because one thing that I definitely learned, apart from what I learned, like the many different things I learned. For example, as I said, my understanding or ability to access Creole cultures or anything Creole was, couldn't have involved any Tamil component at all, because I simply don't know any, But as I traveled through the Indian Ocean, for example, and even in the French Caribbean, I realized that there was a huge element of all this formatively that came from Tamil-speaking communities of India. And how would I ever get to know about all of that from inside? I'm not going to start learning Tamil. I mean, I love languages, but there's some limits, So I realized through Ari that many things opened up, and I feel so much better about that, because of course it's a language that belongs to our space, our Indic space, and it's yet another of those marginalizations or separations, north and south, Tamils and Dravidians and this nonsense, right? So I'm really happy that thanks to Ari, I know so much more, and many curiosities, many things I didn't know are very organically and naturally, that part of my learning is proceeding in the best way through a friend, to somebody you're close to. That's amazing. So without, I don't have to take lessons. We're just chatting and I absorb so much. But it's really, apart from those things, like I can say, yeah, I know this better. I know that better. My French has improved, more than all that, it's really about collaborating itself, about creating something together. I mean, out of love, out of sharing, out of, as you said, no ulterior, like it's going to better my research or Ari's going to write a Booker Prize winning novel or whatever. It's just that we love doing what we do and we enjoy being with each other. And this is a way to be together. So, it's really so satisfying to understand that, especially in the cutthroat academic world, everybody's so depressed and disillusioned because people are just stabbing each other in their backs, and nobody values you, and people are just hating on each other and jealous and all sorts. We are just happy, we're just enjoying what we're doing, and collaboration is so beautiful because it's not about any competition or any insecurity or ownership. So this method of working together has been, it's just, I can't even describe how precious it is. I think I'm a good mentor. I really like to mentor a lot of younger people, my students, people who are like my students. But that's different because you're already in a power dynamic with them. You are mentoring them. You're here and they're there and they're coming up here and you're looking out for them and you're saying, I'm such a good mentor because I look after you. And this is different. We are on the same level. We are interacting as equals. And so this is, totally a different ball game. And it's been really, I have to thank Ari for that, because everything about the way I write particularly has changed a lot. As an academic, we often write in very obfuscated ways, I write much more simply, much more expressively. I'm daring to do different things because of what we do together. So that's really...
There's one beautiful thing that Ananya said recently, is like, she never shared our intellectual space with anyone. So this is the first time she's sharing that intellectual space with me. So I'm very honored for that. And second, since I'm a college dropout, and we think that maybe in some time Ananya will become a creative writer and I'll become academic and get a PhD somewhere.
I was just thinking, you were talking about the cutthroat world of academia, and here I was thinking that there's various points in my life where I've sort of thought wistfully of, I would have liked to have been an academic perhaps, and maybe I should have done that. It seems so nice and collegial and, everybody thinks, so it's not like that really.
Well, Surabhi's now entered that world, so she knows very well also what I'm talking about. It's really quite depressing, and I mean, even, let's be honest, even with our project, various academics who are so-called friends or well-wishers, well, I mean, they turned out to be pretty peculiar towards our work, trying to poach it, trying to, somehow destroy the relationship, all kinds of petty and invidious ways of responding to what we were just doing. So we've had to field a lot of nonsense. But obviously, given that we are not part of that nonsense, I mean, our relationship and what we do is operating such a different way and such a different plane. We haven't been affected in the way that people imagine we would get affected, because, like, their mindset was different. But it's, it's very funny, because in academia, people are always saying, how can we share knowledge? How can we exchange and impact and blah, blah? And I'm like, I'm very relieved that I don't have to worry too much. I'm just doing it, just doing it, because I managed to just stumble into this space, which we shaped together. And it's very, very enjoyable. And it's true. I mean, it's an interesting way. Ari will write a new book, which of course will hopefully be permeated with some of the things that he's doing. My research is being shaped by what I mean. So it's like there's this central space of the thinnai Kreyol, which we have both shared and created together, and we are doing together. And then of course we are individual people as well, and with our own work. And that's kind of being imperceptibly shaped by that shared stuff, so that's also there, but that's kind of value added. It's not the raison d'etre. It's not the central reason we do the thinnai Kreyol, as you pointed out, Peter. That's not why we do it, is because we just wanted to know each other better. And then we realized that there was something we want to give to people also in this process. And it's worked very well. And we'll see how we continue with the changing circumstances. More and more people are getting vaccinated. Even if the virus doesn't go away, we are forced to return to work. So, there'll be less time that we have maybe to spend online with each other. In that case, how do we preserve what we learned and continue to give people that valuable stuff and get their energy back? And we'll surely work it all out. But all of us will have to work that out by and by. So.
Yeah, we've sort of had to come to terms with a world that is not going to be the same as it was. And we have to negotiate that and figure out how it's going to be. What we can, in the way that you've evolved, thinnai, and the way that I'm evolving this, it's a reaction to, okay, this is what has gone before. Who knows what will come, but here's what we're trying to build, kind of thing.
Surabhi is asking, will there be an in-person Kreyol thinnai? Kreyol thinnai. Yeah, we hope so. We hope so, Surabhi. Maybe one day.
Yeah. It might happen, because my book is coming out next week, actually, the thinnai in English version.
Okay.
So Peter, I would love to send you a copy. And please send me your postal address. And if everything goes right, inshallah, next year we'll be in Pondicherry to launch the book, and maybe Ananya and I will present a physical thinnai Kreyol from Pondicherry.
Yeah, that'll be fab.
We have to go to Bombay. That's another place to come. All the best people in India.
Let Peter build a thinnai outside his house, then we can go.
I actually physically currently have that space. The house I live in now, I do have a little space where I can do that kind of thing. So
just put a bench. That's even enough.
I want to bring this sort of back around to one other aspect, and we let Ari go first since he has the tighter deadline. Is there in your food, the way that you've looked at food specifically, has there been any change? Have you, for instance, cooked something differently after the thinnai experience?
For sure I have, but Ari, you.
After the thinnai Kreyol experience?
Yes.
Yeah, for example, our first event, actually, we have invited Jean-Claude Carpana from Réunion, and Gladys from Martinique, Guadeloupe, sorry, or Martinique, right? Guadeloupe, yeah. Right? So that was our first event, and I made a dish which is very, very close to my heart, which is matikale. Matikale is some sort of clams. Mm-hmm. And my grandfathers were very poor agriculture, and so they used to go to the Ariangupam River, which is the biggest river in Pondicherry. So they used to go and get these clams from. So it is part of our family food tradition. Matikale has to be there at least once in a month, just to remember where we come from. And so for me, it was important that my first thinnai, I had to bring that matikalu in memory of my family. So what I did the matikalu, and I put some chardonnay on that, and making like more fancy French thing. And so I creolized my matikalu. So from, from my first event itself, we started to creolize food in that way.
So nice.
I certainly, well, my triumph in this, and we let Ari go after that, is that very early on in the one of the first posts that Ari made on the thinnai Creole page, and Ari, we should make a few more posts because people love those written posts.
Yeah,
Really,
yeah, yeah.
we become lazy, or rather, we are doing so many things that we. So those posts were often, we realized that the ones which were about food, Peter, got like shared and liked, and like people were just like really crazy about these foods, which are posts, which are like nuggets of information about something to do with Creole cuisine. So one of the things that I learned was that in Pondicherry, you have a spice mix called vaduvam. And I had no idea about all this. It's basically, now, I'm sure, Peter, and this is something that in this simple recipes also comes up. It's quite clear that one of the aspects of South Indian Tamil food is they make a lot of these podis, these powders of different kinds. We don't do that in Bengal, for example, dry roast things and grind them and make these powders and spice mixes. So this vaduvam is obviously something of that ilk, but it's become creolized from the very beginning. And there's some story that Duplex's wife, who was a Creole lady, Jean Duplex, actually creolized vaduvam. What's the way you pronounce it?
The real name in Tamil is called Vadagam.
Vadagam, yeah. So from the Vadagam, it became Vaduvan, which was the creolized version, and it mixed a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it became something different. So I was very curious, what is this Vaduvam? And it was the middle of the first lockdown, nothing, with no shops open, no post coming. Somehow I managed to get some from India, from Pondicherry. Somebody I'm online, 3 months later it arrived. Much later, our friends in Paris, whom we've all, this part of this community, Sudha, who is a great cook, she made her own vaduvam and sent me a packet in the post. So what I did is, with this vaduvam, one day, I remember, Ari, I did a whole week of vaduvam. It's very heavy with spice because it's all fried. 1 week, I cooked different things in vaduvam. Some very traditional Pondicherry recipes. Then I started experimenting madly. What goes with the, I would have never done this without the thinnai Creole. So now, a packet of vaduvam always has a place in my fridge. Could have never been there.
Let's send that link to Peter about that vaduvam thing. You will love that, Peter, because vadagam, as I said, it's a very Tamil thing. Even in Tamil Nadu, it was existing.
Madurai, they make,
Madurai, Trichy, and all kind of thing. So it's a story, but I'm not quite sure the veracity of the story if Jean Duplex really did it. But during that period, so that vadagam, which was part of the Tamil cuisine, was cooked by the cook for the French people. And what they had, because it was too strong, they started to use European herbs like thyme and oregano, all kind of stuff, to make it more mild. And that itself gave a great flavor. And all the big chefs in France, they use it like one part of délicatesse.
Yeah.
Pondicherry vaduvam is famous for that. So we'll send you the link. You will love it. And maybe I can ask my friend Sudha to send you a packet of vaduvam. It's same délicatesse.
It's not hot. That's the other thing.
It's not hot at all. But
it's not chili hot.
The taste is very subtle.
Yeah.
The taste is very, very subtle.
If you have the time, there's one other aspect I want to touch on before you go, which is communities of mixed heritage, right, of mixed ancestry, wind up being marginalized by everyone, right? Because they're not pure, right? So aside from all the other stuff that happens around caste in India, of where you're born and who you're born to, if you come from mixed heritage, you're neither here nor there, and you're sort of looked on with at least suspicion and sometimes contempt by people from both the communities, or the multiple communities that you come from. Would you like to touch on that from that Pondicherry experience in a little bit? Because Ananya was also talking about the caste angle on things like communities in Tamil Nadu. Would you like just briefly touch on that before you?
That's interesting because you might have been to Pondicherry many times, and Pondicherry is still a very colonial town because each and every community has their own streets. There's a Chettiar street, there's a small Brahmin, Periya Brahmin, big Brahmin, and whatnot and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So, and because I came in 65, which was like 3 years after the French left. So the French presence, the colonial presence was, you can still feel it. So not only we faced racism, and we also faced casteism. Yeah. So, you grow up with these two bad things for society, racism and casteism. So in Pondicherry, you can feel that. And mainly when you are neither here or not there, that's even more difficult. So one of the reasons that my father or most of my friends or my sister's friend, they were from the Kreyol community because they were like us, exactly like me and my sister and my brother, because we were from a Métis background. So automatically, the only community which was close to us is the Creole community, because first of all, they speak French, and second, because they are also facing the same prejudice from the society. So we get to know each other. I mean, we get along well together. And mainly when you live in a dominant caste, upper caste Tamil area, where people don't even come and take a glass of water in your place because not only you're a pariah and you are Catholic, and then again, your mom is not from here. She's from country they don't even pronounce the name. So then you're gone. So that's one of the reasons that most of our friends, they were part of this Creole community. Maybe that's one of the reasons also I wanted to write about them, because that's how I grew up. I grew up with these people.
Yeah, but so much of I mean, as I think we've touched on, and Ananya touched on as well, and other parts of the thing of people dying for food and, being killed for food and shit like that happens around in this world that we did. And but you add that extra caste dynamic to it, and because of what you eat, you are impure, unclean, whatever it is, or you are purer because you eat only this, and all of that nonsense, frankly. But it's a difficult set of things to navigate through, right? I mean, one of the things I missed out on in this is because my family moved away from places where I've spent a large part of my life explaining why I look the way I do, but I have a name that doesn't fit, for instance, at various points of my life, at various things, and out of no malice. It is just lack of knowledge, right? I'm fortunate that it hasn't come from a place of malice or anger and everything like that. It have been people who are just like, okay, you're different. How? Explain. We haven't come across this. But yes, Ari, I won't hold you any longer if you have to split. I know it's beyond the task.
But Peter, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Always nice to come and sit on your mesa, as I said in Tamil. So mesa speech talk was really good. So
that anytime I learned as well. I mean, I knew mesa from the tabletop kind of thing, but I didn't know it existed in other equivalents as well. But thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Ananya. Hope you
see you later. Yeah.
Ciao, ciao. Bye.
Bye. So I'm just going to take up from where Ari left off, because, Peter, I mean, what I am quite passionate about, or what I feel very passionately about, is that, and this is where theories of creolization can help us work this one out, that it should be possible to turn the matter around, because anything that is in between and not defined, why is it anthropologically, for example, why is the in-between space always so scary? Because it also has power. Because if you're not you're not already boxed in, you've escaped. Somebody has allowed you the the kind of amazing gift of not having a fixed and hemmed in and defined identity. So this is actually well managed. It can be a source of power. It doesn't have to be only a place coming from a place of marginalization. The margin should ultimately be turned around and made powerful. And it is precisely that fear of the powerful towards the margin that keeps the margin marginal, but allows the margin to erupt and overturn. That's how revolutions happen. So I'm not saying that we're going to create a thinnai Creole revolution, but I want, I do feel that we have a responsibility. Some of us are, because of education or because of, certain other, like histories, personal histories, have been fortunate to escape that precarity or that danger that others coming from the same identity positions as us face. So we have the right, we have the duty rather and responsibility to use what we have, which is a security of a certain kind. We are articulate, we can communicate, we can show by example, and to keep opening quietly spaces up so that that fear and shame that people feel about themselves can be turned around. And maybe even in a microscopic way, change can happen. People can feel more empowered. And I think we were all, I'm sure, when we were in our 20s, some of us were quite sure that we could all wage war and change the world and topple everything and turn everything. Revolution was not impossible. I mean, I really don't think that that's practical as a way forward. We all have to survive, and we also have to guard each other and look out and protect each other while trying to validate each other. So I think that for me, it's all about these microscopic ways of effecting change, right from where we would seem to be the most abject, the most disempowered, the most marginalized, the most in between. And that's why we can actually be also the most free to do certain things. And we should continue to do that. I mean, I think it's amazing that, you're not carrying, you're free of a caste name, for example, because that's what, like so many people we know. I have friends whose parents were very revolutionary and thought that India was new and changing, and they gave their children, who are our contemporaries now, maybe, names which try to escape caste, like fanciful names, combined names and things. I have so many people telling me how when they were giving the ICSE or whatever, school teachers would insert their parents' caste name. How can you have a name like this? You're re-inscribed back. Or people would say, you must be low caste and that's why you don't have a surname. I mean, the people, so, we're free because we don't have those names. So that's great. People kept asking me also, because I have this strange combined name. Why do you have this name? Who is Muslim? Who is Hindu? Who is what? I'm like, everybody's everything. The name is the name. People just gave me a name, So I think these issues are can be frustrating when you're growing up and in school, and it can be very embarrassing. Why did my parents give me the stupid name? But then after a while, you're like, hey, no, nobody can box me. Nobody can pin me down. And I'm always slipping through these straitjackets. So that's great. I mean, let me do something with this gift. So I think that's for me. That's why the thinnai Kreyol is very satisfying, because I always had these ideas and desires, but now there's a way I can kind of smuggle them out into the world, So I think that's my take on what Ari started saying, about the actual experience of being part of these communities. And we are lesser, or, so I'm not, I mean, I'm from a very, straightforward Bengali Muslim family. In my own parentage, there's no admixture, if you want to put it like that. But firstly, we've realized that in India today now, class and social position or financial profile, none of this is holding water anymore. It's all getting down to basics. What are you? What do you eat? What's your name? And we're out to get you. So those So somehow one is suddenly like, oh my God, one's actually quite, you realize what's the basis of privilege and security. And that may open up ways to feel solidarity with people who have always faced that. And the second thing is, of course, one's own family may have also had different kinds of outward facing relationships with people, which therefore always made you aware that there were such groups. And it's like one of my favorite food stories is actually in our apartment in Calcutta. Below us lived a Mangalorean family. And my uncle married somebody from that family. So actually now they then very early on, they were related to us. So there were these two big families living on different floors, a Bengali Muslim family with a lot of children, siblings, and a Mangalorean Catholic family with a lot of children, and two of them met and got married. So we had a lot of coming and goings. My mother is quite religious, or at least was perceived to be religious, and therefore I was not eating pork. I was, and I was a child, so it's like, my aunts were, my father's sisters were, they were just like, So I would go downstairs. So there was downstairs and upstairs. So I would go downstairs, and I remember these like big bowls of sausage curry and things, and they'd be like, not for you because Bhabhi will kill us. And I'm like, but I mean, so from a very early age, I got pretty impatient with this fact that I was being denied these delights. But the point is, look at this accommodation. But it's not that you're like, chi, you can't go there because they're cooking pork. It's like, go, I mean, they're eating their own thing. They're cognizant too that she's a child. She can't yet make her mind up. Her mother may have different ideas. So let's also keep that responsibility. But the first thing I did is when I started going to my other Catholic friends' homes in school, I'm like, get me the sorpatel and the sausage curry because I'm just fed up of being denied these things, So when you live next to each other, you develop bonds, you awarenesses, respect, you take your decision where you want to break the boundaries and push them. And so these are the kinds of power, again, and solidarities that can grow from a marginalized position. I was not growing up in a kind of Muslim family that was freaking out because pork was around the corner. People in my own family were eating pork, because they were marrying people who were eating pork. And I was in that milieu, but I wasn't eating it because they felt it was not correct for me to do it without knowing what I was doing. And then when I was like, I know what I'm doing, so I'm going to do it. Excuse me. But it's that many of my cousins, some of my cousins decided they were going to be more religious than others. So they would never do that. Others were just like, from the word go, they were, so that kind of freedom is what I feel is actually quite powerful. We were given a freedom which is very rare in India, where everybody's mostly with diet and who you marry and who you hang out with, are very boxed. And this is our undoing. We have a lot of diversity and we should be able to explore that, not, oh God, I can't. So this is why I feel we are actually in a position of power, even though it seems that we're in a position of marginalization.
Just recalling also, one of the conversations that we had in chat about people's reactions to food, and we were talking, and you said, I think I'm going to put one of those blood recipes on the group.
Yes.
And the thing is, where does that come from? Where do these, now, if you come from a position of some affluence, there are things you can discard and not use, right? If you come from a place where everything that comes in you have to have the maximum value extracted from it, then you learn, in one case, say to use, as was happened in the recipe group, was to use the white of the watermelon, right?
Yeah.
It's a good subject.
Amazing.
In a similar way, people who had not access to that much variety in their food and would butcher one animal would have to get everything they could, extract what they could from the way, from anything, the organs, the offal, all of that kind of thing. We were talking about this on Table Talk some time ago. A friend of mine who has a farm and has moved to the farm and the family lives there. One of them is vegan, one of them is vegetarian, one who eat pretty much everything. And the person who works with them on the farm was like, they had butchered an animal and they sent a blood a recipe, a blood dish there.
Mm.
And it fell to the person in the family who was not vegan or vegetarian to have all of that. And that person was not particularly enamored of this idea in the first place, being unaccustomed to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, just this thing of acknowledging where food comes from as well is an important part of this process, right? Of understanding that if you had to kill an animal to eat, you took what you could in every single way.
Yeah.
Everything had value,
Yeah.
right? So the delicacies of one place, I mean, if you've not conceived of getting your protein from insects, it may be repellent to you, or
I
a
completely
snake,
agree. Now,
whatever.
absolutely, Peter. Now I have this great conversation running in my head about why am I so repelled by the insects and
Mhm.
eating the idea of eating it? And I simply know that that is the limit of my flexibility and my curiosity and my ability to want to creolize and this and that. I won't go there because I just simply have this very a feeling of disgust coming out from me. Now we have to then accept that there will be that same feeling of disgust that things that we find normal are going to provoke in people. I think what is important through all this is acknowledging that this is a very kind of primal feeling, and it's something that is uh, part of our very early, I think, socializing, in the world, our family lives, very intimate. So what we feel disgusted by and what we can, some of us are individuals who can push the boundaries more, some won't, but there is that primal disgust about certain foodstuffs. And that has certainly to do with society more than food itself. And so what do you do with that? Um, First of all, it's obviously extremely philosophically and politically and in every way not condonable that people are imperiled, their lives are put in danger because somebody feels disgusted with somebody else's food. I mean, it's not on, just don't eat it, don't go there. But you cannot use that as a weapon to oppress people and to exercise your power over them. So this is what's happening in our country, and that's the problem, obviously. And the second thing is accepting. Uh, that's the other end. Then that's what I see happening in the simple recipes group. That over the year we've all become more and more accepting of each other's curiosities and have pulled each other up, on occasion. Don't use caste system. It's like a conundrum because so much of the food that we eat and our community sense is formed through caste and religion that we can't, people will say casually this Brahmin recipe or this that, and we've learned to do a kind of fact check or just checking our privilege or checking the tone or whatever, and so that kind of awareness and responsibility for each other has become more sharp in this group. I think, as I see, we expose more and more of ourselves to each other. I don't think that means that we're just going to start eating things that disgust us just because we want to be politically aware. But I think we don't need to tell somebody else that I'm finding a food disgusting. We can just quietly keep our disgust to ourselves, because why should we make them feel bad? Maybe we'll find ways to overcome it or push our own boundaries and accept, and maybe it'll be very delicious and we'd be like, oh no, I should have been eating caterpillar grub all my life. Why didn't I do that? So it's really up to us. But the main thing is to not to be conscious that food has been another weapon, and we must not allow it to become a weapon. We may have our personal tastes and we keep that to ourselves, and we are interested in what other people do because they're doing it for whatever reason and we want to know about it. I mean, I have another very small anecdote, which is really something that is so unusual when I think about it, when I look back. So when I was 4, we moved out of Calcutta and we went to live in central India. And my father's work took us there. So this was very different, complete change of scene, change of diet, change of everything. And a lot of the beef stuff, for example, had to stop because you simply couldn't get that in Nagpur. We had a group of friends who were Bengalis, but they were Hindus. We were the only Bengali Muslim family there. And so the kids were my friends. We are still friends after all these years, very close. So I remember we were moving from our home into a set of cars to maybe go somewhere else. The adults were there and the kids were also there, and we were all moving in groups. And so people could overhear the children talking. And I was telling my friend, you should taste tongue. It's so delicious. And I may have been 4 or 5. And she was like, what is tongue? And I said, tongue, tongue. It's like the cow's tongue. It's so tasty. It's so soft. And because we used to make this tongue sandwich, and then you can put in a sandwich. And my friend, this girl was like, huh? You eat a cow's tongue? And the adults started laughing. I remember that. So my mother started shushing me. She was like, you must realize that you can't, talk about everything to everybody. And the other adults who were not, they were like, don't be silly, they're children, let them talk. That kind of acceptance and the laughter of the adults, I can't imagine that happening today in India. I really don't. I mean, maybe in certain circles, but innocently just blabbing what you eat at home like that, everybody's more guarded. So I remember that scene and I just think, wow, that was the milieu one grew up in, and that didn't mean that I was going to be forcing my friend to eat my tongue sandwich, or they were admonishing me, or no longer going to be my friend. Everything was perfectly fine. People were laughing and joking about it, and nobody even remembered it, but it stayed in my mind for some reason. And I still remember that every time whenever I read a story, some horror story about beef in India, and I think, wow, there was another time. Maybe we can hope that we would regain that old spirit.
You just see that even in our, and when Surabhi and myself were in college, we'd have parties, we'd have friends over. You would acknowledge that there would be some vegetarians. You would make a vegetarian dish. That
Exactly.
vegetarian dish would be sitting on the table next to the meat, and no one thought anything amiss there. That that this was cooked. You had no idea, for instance, who had made that vegetarian dish, which is important to some people.
Yes.
What vessels it was cooked in.
Yes.
The vegetarians in our group simply would take that as, yes, you extended the courtesy of acknowledging my vegetarianism by making something that is 100% vegetarian.
Yeah.
By your lights.
Yeah.
For me, right? And I will take it in the spirit in which it is offered and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And you remember this thing of something or the other. I think we ordered pizza. This was early in my working life. And we were like, big pizza, but how do you think? And then, somebody wanted this topping and something, and the vegetarian said, I wanted this. And
you divided it.
Can you do a half and half pizza with this and this? And this pizza supplier said, yeah, that's fine. And they sent it. And one dish with people taking, okay, this looks like the vegetarian bit. And I can't see that happening now.
No.
If someone would order a 16-inch pizza with half vegetarian and half pork product or whatever it was, and happily sit and, okay, you shouldn't be eating this because that looks like sausage. And that's it. That's the limit of the conversation, on that.
Somebody Surabhi wants to share an anecdote.
I thought I'd just come in now. I couldn't resist. So no, I just listening to this, especially again, Ananya, what you brought up about the group, the simple recipe group. There's this, so my daughter, when she was in her second standard, I think, so she went to a school which had its own curriculum, and they decided to introduce the idea of history by introducing the idea of the history of Bombay, rather than start with the Pandavas and the Mughals and the whatever, but like start with your neighborhood, your Bombay. And they reached out to two of us parents to just do a Bombay Darshan tour, kids, to do a history of Bombay. And we decided we had to start with the Sassoon docks, with the Kohli village, in Colaba. So we decided we would start with the Kohli village and go to Sassoon docks and then open up the story of Bombay. And there are two classes. The school had two classes. There was, I think, 8 years old maybe. And the school had a lot of Gujarati and Jain kids. So like really, really strict vegetarians. And two classes, the class teacher of my daughter's class, when I said we are going to Sassoon dock, she said, great. And the other teacher said, Sassoon dock, that might be a bit uncomfortable for our kids who are vegetarian. So Sana's class teacher, she said, they live in Bombay. I'm not protecting them from from the roots of Bombay, and we leave it open to the children to decide. And they were in 2 school buses. The kids from this teacher's class, because that was the message she was promoting all through, all the kids, including these kids who actually couldn't handle the smell. The teacher had thoughtfully brought lime and cut it into half and told the kids who couldn't handle the smell as a sundok to just smell the lime. They refused to stay back in the bus, though we gave them that option, because there was that sense of curiosity about what is it. The other bus, which was the other class, where the teacher had already sent out a kind of a subliminal message, you won't believe it. Not only did they not get off, they were actually bawling that our parents are going to be upset that we were brought, and these are 7 to 8 year olds.
Unbelievable.
And it's not the community, right? It's the messaging that is being given out. And it was a shattering moment for me that a 7 or 8 year old is more concerned about how upset the parent is going to be, that they were brought to the gate of Sasundok. It's not as if they've taken anywhere. And that was, I think, one of the early times that I realized that something had intrinsically changed in our ecosystems. So yeah, that was just something I thought I'd.
That's a really amazing story, because all the 2 buses almost became like 2, control experiment kind of thing. It's totally different result at the end of it all. Amazing.
Absolutely. And it was all fed, it was all fed to the children. It's not as if any parent complained that why did you take my Gen kids to the Sasundok, they might have thought to themselves, I'm proud of my kid that they didn't get off the bus. I don't know, whatever. But nobody was, but it was already, that other teacher was so anxious
that communicated to the kids somehow.
To insult or offend certain sensibility.
Yeah.
And we all learned to eat beef and pork in our college canteen.
Exactly. Those were the spaces, right? School, college, Peter, I must start wrapping up, because speaking about food, I am dying of hunger and I have to start cooking dinner. And I cannot cook dinner and keep on table talk because of the way things are arranged in my home. That's the only reason. So another day I'll have a cooking demo alongside the table talk.
So we're at we're 2.5 hours right now, which was longer than I thought we would be able to go, because Ananya did tell me that she might not have more than 2 hours, and Ari might not have more than 1.5 hours. Ari stayed for 2 and Ananya stayed for 2.5. So it's been fun, and thank you so much for this. Perhaps Ananya, you and Ari could share with me a list of resources, books, articles, websites, etc., that people who are interested in this topic may want to read on or look at further, and I'll share it with everyone who attended.
Lovely. Absolutely. And of course, just a lot is collected already on our own Facebook page, which many people know about too. So people are invited.
Which I've sent to everyone who signed up for the chat. In any case, I've given them all your resources. But if you do want to put down anything that said, these are books that you might like to read and that kind of thing.
Okay, I'll give it a think, and I'll certainly send some stuff along. So anyway, it's good to...
A reminder to all who also, if you enjoyed the chat, Ananya and Abir have chosen the Afghanistan, UNICEF Afghanistan's fund. If you'd like to say thank you for this conversation, you can make a small donation to UNICEF's fund and send us the receipt if you want to. This is not mandatory, right? If you can afford to, if you can spare the funds, please make a donation to UNICEF's Afghanistan fund. If you want to, and this is entirely voluntary, I'll send the link out again. It's entirely voluntary on all of these counts. Please do if you can, but thank you for sparing the time, 2.5 hours of your Sunday, to chat with us and to listen to this conversation. Do come back. I will send you further links on Afghanistan, on anything else that you want. And when Ari and Ananya send me their list, I will send that on to you. But for now, Ari is not here to say thank you to again, but thank you, Ari. And thank you, Ananya. This has been a lovely evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Hopefully one day in person soon, not too long in the future.
And
So
thank you
look
for
forward
joining in,
to that.
Surabhi. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you very
bye,
much.
everyone. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.